Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about anthrax, and next week I'll be talking about the band anthrax, not the disease. Anthrax is also known as wool sorter's disease, as shown by my wool sock. Um, with this picture, obviously you can see that Bacillus anthracis, which is the infectious agent for anthrax, is gram-positive because it's purple and it's also rod-shaped, and you can see with the little rods. Um, what makes it almost extraordinary is that it can be grown in basically any nutrient medium, and it's also aerobic and anaerobic. And the spores that it forms, they're highly resilient, and they can basically live anywhere. Which also means like it's another nickname for it was the Siberian plague, and when you think of Siberia, you think of like frozen wastelands and stuff like that, and it can live practically anywhere, which means it's much more harder to get rid of because it could be in the soil and you might not even know, and it can infect cows or other people and stuff like that. There's 89 known strains of Bacillus anthracis. Mainly right here, I'm going to be talking about the Stern strain, which was used by Max Stern in his 1930 vaccines. Then the Volum strain, which was isolated from a cow in Oxfordshire, England. And that's the one basically from around World War II until more recent times, as you can see with the AIM strain, that was used to weaponize and actually caused a lot of problems because you can see that it contaminated Grunard Island in 1942. Then for Volume 1B, uh, it's believed that it was isolated from a victim of self-infection. Like the guy was a scientist for the U.S. and he got infected and then he ended up dying from it. Then the AIM strain was the one that was used as a bioterrorist weapon with the letters in 2001 after 9/11. And here you can see dilations of the Stern and the AIM strain, and it starts with a not as concentrated, and it goes up to more concentration. So you can see with the bacterial lawn that it grows pretty quickly. As you might have noticed, anthrax isn't just some recent thing for bioterrorism or whatever. It's actually really, really super duper, super duper old. It's one of the oldest diseases that has been recorded, and it goes all the way back to the Bible. And in Exodus, it's thought to be the fifth plague when all the cows and all the cattle and stuff like that start dying. And that thought of it being a plague from God maintained its sort of entity until more recent times when there was an increase of uh, good science and people actually knowing what they're doing. And that leads to this French guy who was like the Louis Pasteur before Louis Pasteur, named Casimir Devin, and he identified it. Then Robert Koch, uh, he isolated it in 1876, and he gets most of the credit for it, which I don't really think is fair because Casimir found it first. Then, taking it one step further, Louis Pasteur comes onto the scene and makes a vaccine. And this is key to the creation of micro and immunology and all these really fantastic things that stem from that. And anthrax basically pushed biology up into another whole level. Further transmission. Now this is how we see that it's called wool sorter's disease because the people who get cutaneous anthrax, they work with sheep and wool and stuff like that. And hopefully my socks don't give me anthrax because they're wool. But it also happens when you can inhale the spores that are in the air that comes from working with these materials like wool and leather and hair. Tanneries were known to pass along anthrax, so they'll be working with the hides from cows, and cows will carry it on them, they won't even know. It also happens from eating raw and undercooked meat. This mainly happens outside the U.S. because there's more vaccines that are placed on cattle that are used for food purposes, and it's gastrointestinal anthrax is bad stuff, real bad stuff. Um, And this mainly happens because they're not inspected. Slaughterhouses are just slaughterhouses. There's blood everywhere. It's not cleaned. The animals aren't checked for diseases, and they'll just cook it however they can, and that causes a disease to be more common. Not as common as cutaneous anthrax, which is the most common, but it's up there. Um, Now for symptoms, this is where it gets nasty. The typical signs of anthrax are black sores and swelling, and it doesn't hurt, which is interesting because I'd figure something like that, and as you'll see in a minute, it'll hurt a lot. And also, what's been going on is injection anthrax, where heroin addicts will have contaminated needles, or the drugs will be contaminated with anthrax from the spores, and they'll have abscesses where they'll inject themselves. So it'll be in like odd places on their arms or wherever else you inject anthrax. I'm not 100% sure. Then here you can see the black abscesses, and the eyes are getting swollen. Like homie on the left, like his eye's probably gone because it's all black. Then you can see that it's also on the neck and the face and on other places. I think on the bottom left, I think that might be his arm. Pretty sure. Then for gastrointestinal anthrax, the symptoms are kind of similar, but they're more extreme, like painful swallowing and diarrhea or bloody diarrhea, and your abdomen gets swollen, and there's also bloody vomiting, which is pretty hardcore. For the prognosis for cutaneous anthrax, it's usually pretty okay for anthrax. If you don't get treated, there's a 20% chance you can die, but if you get treated as soon as you get infected, you'll be okay. Thankfully, gastrointestinal anthrax is barely in the United States because there's more regulation on animals and food processing. But without treatment, and if you just keep on living your life with gastrointestinal anthrax, you will die. Like 50% chance, and I'm not going to risk those chances. The incidence, it's generally anthrax is really rare because of all the regulation, and then because you barely find it, because usually for the most part it's in the soil or it's places that humans don't regularly go to. The only time it was a lot of cases was in 2001 after 9/11 when it was used for bioterrorism. In that case, there was 11 cases of inhalation and 11 cases for cutaneous anthrax that were identified. Then in the Philippines, and if you thought 22 was bad, in the Philippines, 400 people had gastrointestinal anthrax from eating meat from infected caribou. I don't know how the caribou got there, but it was bad. Then, even worse than that, in Zimbabwe, 10,000 people got cutaneous anthrax in the span of, let's see, that's 6 years. So that's wild. So here with this map provided by the School of Veterinary Medicine from LSU, there's each color has a significant meaning. So yellow is sporadic, pink is endemic, red is hyperendemic and epidemic, light green is probably free, dark green is completely free, and gray is unknown. Obviously, we're not going to know about Antarctica. So as you can tell, with mainly the pink spots are basically second world countries where there's a somewhat more regulation, but there's not significant amount for it to be yellow, like you can see with the U.S. and most of Europe and Russia, where there's very, very few cases. Luckily for Greenland and Iceland and the Scandinavian countries, they don't have anthrax. But as you can tell with some countries in Central Africa and also on the western coast, they are epidemic. And it happens more frequently because of less regulation, and also there's not proper access to healthcare in those areas, and also with Turkey, um, there's less healthcare and regulations to prevent these things from happening. So anthrax is something that can be prevented as long as there's proper regulation and proper treatment. And mainly proper treatment comes from prevention and having antibiotics available to the animals that are infected, because the animals are mainly the reason why humans become infected with anthrax. So that was my presentation on anthrax. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.